Welcome, all my lovely edge dwellers. Lucca Hallex here, Power Sorcerer. This is one of my podcast series on what's going on our learning edge. And today, I have Robin with me, and Robin has agreed to come along and chat with me because we had a very interesting conversation the other day, and I thought, oh, this would be wonderful for talking about what's on our learning edge, because it's one of my favorite places to be and operate. This is Robin Eriksson, and I'm going to let Robin introduce herself to you in a second. But I just wanted to say that for about 7.5 years, I was doing a radio show, co-hosting a radio show with my friend and colleague Rebecca Mears at CJSF Radio at Simon Fraser University, and we had a weekly spoken word show where we talked to folks about what was going on in their lives and what their essence was, and what their passion was. And that's where I met Robin. When you freshly moved here from Winnipeg, right? You were like fresh off the plane, so to speak, when I met you. And it turned out that Robin lived in my neighborhood, which I thought was really cool. So I said, oh, good, you're in my neighborhood. There's lots of cafes around. Let's meet for coffee. And thus started a friendship. So welcome, Robin. It's lovely to have you talking with me today, having a conversation. Conversations along with coffee are two of my absolute favorite things. So I get to, no, I'm not having coffee. We're across continents at the moment because I'm in the Highlands of Scotland and Robin is in Vancouver, in East Vancouver. And so we're in completely different time zones. So for me, this is late evening, and for you, Robin, it's mid-afternoon.
Just about tea time.
Yes, just about tea time. So I have tea, but it's nettle tea because there's no caffeine in it. So I've waffled on now. So let's just I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say by way of introducing yourself, and then we'll just get into chatting about what's going on in your life and perhaps mine at the same time, because I think there's some juicy overlap in terms of things we're learning at the moment. So yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Lucca. It's an honor to be asked to be on your podcast and to think that I might have something to say about learning.
Well, it's your learning, right? It's not, I mean, we may end up wandering into the territory of learning in general, because I know that you've been teaching some interesting stuff in the last little while, but yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of what I can say, just as a introduction, although I never feel very good at it, partly because I think socially we're very conditioned to talk about what we do.
Yes. Are we ever?
In terms of like, who are you? Well, this is what I do, and so that is who I am. And part of my learning edge, I think, is to certainly identify with what I do, because it's a big part of my life and big part of our lives as human beings, making our way through the world. But I think more than anything right now, I'm a woman in transition, and that can mean a whole lot of different things. What it mostly means for me is that I don't know much.
It's an interesting
I,
place to be, isn't it?
I probably know less than more. Um, and it's funny because I think we also get to a point in our lives where we think we should know a whole lot than we end up knowing
Yeah.
or recognizing that we know. Um, but on the flip side, also kind of being able to tap into this knowing that um, maybe we weren't accustomed to recognizing or acknowledging in this same way. And so it is this interesting edge.
Yeah. I it's knowing, knowledge and knowing, and what we're supposed to know at any given time of our lives is such an interesting topic, because who says what we're supposed to know, and what is knowledge anyway? I mean, there's a kind of book knowledge that we have when we study things when we're in school, but there's an organic kind of knowledge, I think, that comes from living our lives the way we do, and how we choose to live our lives, especially if we step out of the mainstream. And I think you and I are both people who have stepped out of the mainstream. And what does that do to what we know, to what we know about ourselves and what we know about life, and how we apply that? Do you have a sense of what you might be in transition between?
I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is life and death. And
Yeah.
that sounds dire
Mm.
and dramatic. Um, but I think that that's also very much part of my reality right now. And um, the the instance of any kind of a transition means life or death.
It does, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so I guess part of my learning edge also is recognizing that um, even in instances where we are talking about mortality in a life and death kind of a way, um, life and death in those ways where our lives shift and change, and all of a sudden, the foundation that we had, that we thought we were standing on, that was firm and solid and looked like it was going to last forever, is not holding us quite in the same way. And and that that falling into, or that letting go into, is also a death process and a rebirth process into what is going to be next. And so, yeah.
And isn't that, I mean, you could argue that life is a process between living and dying, right? Being born and dying. Um, and I think that many of us live lives where, what do we call them? Lives of quiet desperation, um, where we're not, um, where we're not perhaps living as authentically as we would like to be able to live. And I think that when you come up against anything that challenges whether you will still be on the planet or not, physically embodied, it brings up for you all those issues about, am I living an authentic life, as authentic as I would like it to be, right? What and it forces us to take a look at what our hopes, our dreams, what we've accomplished, what we haven't, what we've experienced, what we haven't, all of those things. And I read many years ago a book by a man. Ironically, his name is Bridges, and he wrote a book called Transitions.
I've read that book.
Little thin book, yeah, and I really like that book. And one of the things he says in it is that we're afraid of death, and so that translates into we're afraid of endings. And so that he said that we often just skip right over them, of all kinds of endings in our lives. We just skip right over them, and so therefore don't always complete before we move on to something else. Of course, I'm in the business of talking to people about when I often talk to entities once they're gone, because people come and see me when somebody has died in their lives, and they want to know if they're okay and where they are and all that. And I don't get aware. I never get aware, but I do get I'm fine. But I think just having somebody in your life who has gone through that, who has made a transition of any kind, it forces up all of these unexamined or maybe unresolved or processed maybe things. I found that definitely when I moved. I left Vancouver and came across to Europe, that people have feelings about that. But it's less, I think, about my transition than it is about all the things that it brings up for them about their transitions. And I'm curious to know whether you're finding that with the transition that you're in at the moment. Do you feel like other people have reactions to what's going on for you in your life, and what they think that means?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I guess to, be transparent and put things into context, I got a diagnosis of cancer in December, and that comes with a whole sort of social canon of what to do and how to do it and what it means. And like there's just so much baggage kind of around what that looks like in society. And oftentimes it's equated with death, right? Cancer death. And those two things are equal weight almost.
Yeah.
And that there's this notion in all of that rhetoric of survival versus victim, and being at war and battling and fighting it out, and really these like military sort of ideals that I don't believe are helpful.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've offended a lot of people because I don't espouse to believing that I need to fight to the death for my life in the same way that that the mainstream sort of sells my survival to be based on, right? And that's terrifying. It's scary for a lot of people I know. It's scary for me too, because I don't know, and ultimately, whether I choose the blue pill or the red pill, it's still a pill, and it's still kind of a crapshoot about where I land and where I end up. And so yeah, so it's an interesting place to be for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. I've thought a lot lately about what does it mean to stay out of the fear of what might come in the future, based on what we've experienced or been afraid to experience in the past. Because really, in any life, today is all we have. And I know that's, I mean, it's cliche in a way to say it, but it is still so true that that when we make any kind of choice that carries risk with it. Um, I mean, giving up a career is like that. Um, I did that when I was 30. I walked away from the business world and said, okay, I'm gonna try something else now. And I know that you've made some career changes in your life. That radio where I met you is not the only part of your career. Um, what was that like for you when you made those kinds of changes in your life?
I feel like I've had so many lives.
Yeah.
I'm I'm definitely a cat, in that I've had 9 lives
Yeah.
or more
Yeah.
kinds of ways. Um, and some of them have been thrust upon me in external sort of ways where I've kind of been hit from the side and have to make some decisions and choices about what comes next. In other instances, I've made the choice to, follow a different path or go a different way. So yeah, I don't know that there's one. I don't think that there's one easy or straight answer for that question, because those opportunities, I will call them,
Yeah. Yeah.
come at us in different ways at different times in our lives for all kinds of different reasons, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we don't always know or appreciate what those are until later, and maybe never in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, I
Do those come back for you? Like as you're dealing with a transition in the present moment, whatever kind of transition it might be, because you moved from one part of Canada to another part of Canada in order to study and change jobs in the process. Um, that that what I find when I make a big change is that it evokes other big changes that I've made in my life, and it brings up for me who am I now as opposed to who was I when I made those other changes. So right now I'm sitting in Scotland 30 years after I came here the first time. And I'm not the same person as I was 30 years ago, although I'm in a same place. The place isn't exactly the same as it was 30 years ago. The people I know here are not exactly the same as they were 30 years ago, if they were even here 30 years ago. So, and I find myself doing some comparisons of how am I the same and how am I different now? And what does that mean about how I'm approaching the changes that I'm choosing, because I'm choosing them. And definitely with a cancer diagnosis, you can say that you're not necessarily choosing that, but you are choosing what you do with it. And that's, I mean, you haven't faced a diagnosis before in your life, but you have had other choices that, as you said, have been foisted upon you. Um, are you going through that process as I have been of looking at the different versions of you?
Yeah, I would say that is there's definitely a revisiting of I think how I've stepped into those challenges or stepped into those transitions, and the strength that I had to sort of navigate and mitigate what those look like in the time, because in the time they were sometimes devastating and sometimes exciting, and sometimes all of the things wrapped up in a bow, because I don't think one comes without the other necessarily. Like exciting things can still be scary, and scary things can still be exciting. And
yeah, I've been talking about that, scary, exciting, because I mean, they're kissing cousins, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely feeling like I can have this reflection of, who and how I managed before versus now, and the the genuine capacity that I have that didn't exist 20 years ago, or even 7 years ago when I moved here, and just recognizing how the the it's a lot about what I choose to see also.
Yeah.
Versus what I expect to see, or allowing my expectations to kind of get ahead of my reality. And so, yeah, that's become a bit of a learning edge, I guess, is just to try to stay and recognize more presence, and where I can have more presence, rather than try to figure out what my future might or might not look like, because I don't know what that looks like. And what I was thinking this morning, none of us get out of here alive.
Exactly.
And that we don't know what that looks like also. I could drown in the ocean because I'm not a strong swimmer. All kinds of things could happen to me, even though I've been given this quote unquote terminal diagnosis. That doesn't define really anything about what the scope of my life means. And so, it's just interesting how we, I guess, make meaning, and how perspective on things really is dictated by where we put our attention, and that kind of all that stuff.
I was thinking about big transitions, and I was thinking about when because I've studied a number of times in my life, and so have you. When I graduated from university when I was 21 years old, it was like, well, the expectation is that now you'll start. I was supposed to start in January sending out resumes, to organizations that I wanted to join. And I did a management degree, so everybody assumed I was going to go into management and follow what I studied. But nobody talked about what it feels like to transition from education, where your full-time job is to learn things, to working. And what does that even mean? And are you launching a career that's going to be, you're going to get on one ship and stay on that one ship for the rest of your life until you retire? And or is this a stint that you do? Nobody, I mean, even career counselors in university were about getting you a job. They weren't about what does a career mean to you and what kind of career do you think you might like to have, because nobody even knew that there could be different kinds of career. I mean, I don't think that they were negligent, but they just, like, it was 1981, we didn't know. And then I made another massive career change when I was 30, and coupled it with a move, just like you did. It's like I went from Toronto to Vancouver, and didn't really know what I was doing, and ended up changing my career again. But again, what does that mean? And how do we go about reforming ourselves like that? Everybody assumes that the big deal is what you're studying now, not who are you as you evolve into a student again. And what does that mean? And what could it mean? And what are your greatest hopes around that? And what are your greatest fears? Like, it doesn't even come up as a topic for conversation. And I was studying psychotherapy. You would think it would have arisen somewhere, and it didn't. And then I changed careers again and became a coach. But that was just on the career front. But I was combining the career shifts with massive life shifts. The first big career shift was at 30, so it was like I had just come to that end of my Saturn return, my first Saturn return, and it just about turned me inside out. Nobody talked about that either, right? I'm really curious as we get to this stage in our lives, and I'm a little bit older than you are, but you've had enough changes under your belt, that, you know, what are you discovering about who you are as you look back at your life and look forward at what you might still want to experience, know, partake of? I mean, we have the opportunity here to be more aware, I guess, to ask more questions that we didn't even know to ask when we were younger and hadn't lived as much.
I had no idea the questions to ask when I was younger.
No. Maybe we don't even now,
No, certainly.
But we wouldn't.
Maybe
we
less
certainly
now.
wouldn't have had this kind of conversation, 40 years ago.
But I like to think that I'm more humble about the things that I don't know now than I ever was when I was a young person. I think that I was quite arrogant in the fact that I was a smart kid.
Mm-hmm.
I caught on well. I had, kind of a big picture vision of things. And, I was always the person who, and still am, that people come and ask me for advice. So yeah, I thought I knew something or another.
When did you discover that you might not know as much as you thought you knew?
Well, I think probably when my mom died, I really was, that really threw me for a loop. And as much as we felt as a family, we were prepared. It wasn't a surprise. We all knew that she was going to die. But when it actually happened, I think that the discombobulation of me thinking that I had it all under control and that I didn't at all, was really a taste of, I don't know. There's mysteries bigger than we are, right?
Yeah.
And there's a saying, I don't know if it's a saying, but it's like there are things that we can know, and there's things that we don't know, and there's things that we're never going to know.
Yeah, those are the great mysteries.
There's three knowings,
mm-hmm.
and I think that, for me, when we talk about this edge of learning, part of what I'm learning and where that edge is to really like differentiate between those three parts, right? These are things that I know, these are things that I don't know, and these are things that I'm just never going to know because they are beyond my capacity as a human
like
being,
what happens to us after we die, right? I mean, we don't, even I, who talk to people who are dead all the time, I don't know what happens. Not only do I not know what happens to them, I don't know what's going to happen to me after I'm dead. Don't know.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also the things that we think we know that we later find out we didn't really.
For sure. Yeah. And those are live and learn, school of hard knocks, kinds of hindsight things, right? That that just make life part of the fun and interesting game that it is.
You're doing something that I'm not doing at the moment, which is going through life with a partner. And I know that as we go through transitions, the person with whom we're partnering goes through them too, because we impact one another. I mean, you could even say that we do this in friendships, right? It's I remember when I left Toronto, I left one of my closest friends behind, and she had feelings about that. She had a reaction to it, and justifiably so. But you've gone through several major life changes with a partner with you.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know what that does to how that influences us on our learning edge, to have somebody else in our life who's impacted by the choices that we make.
Ooh.
It's big, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, that feels like such a gigantically complex question to me. Partly because I feel in some ways that I am making decisions more autonomously than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the healthiest, most interdependent thing that I can do for my partnership, which is in a way kind of counterintuitive to the ways that we're brought up to be codependent and always serve the other and be considerate. And where do we find the equal ground of negotiation, and all of these things. And so I'm in trying, and I'm using the word trying because I don't feel very successful at it sometimes, but in trying to be more selfish in a way, I feel like that benefits my relationship and my partnership in ways that feels strange at the moment. We've my partner and I met during our first Saturn return, and it's our second Saturn return, and so our individually we're in our second Saturn return, but so is our relationship. And there's big transitions. I also feel like our relationship is very karmic, and I joke to him all the time that it really doesn't matter what happens here, because this isn't our first rodeo. It's not going to be our last rodeo. We're going to rodeo again. And as fatalist as that sort of sounds, there's also a liberation and a freedom that comes along with that, where we can kind of let go of what it means to hold on to each other so dearly in this moment, or in this incarnation, that feels okay, like I've been in other relationships, and it's like if I let that go, right, it's not going to come back, or
it sounds like there's some trust involved in that.
Well, I think that also comes from just living with someone for what is over half my life.
Oh God, yes. No, and I agree that definitely trust in the relationship, but also trust in this somehow life and this greater plan that with this journey that we're on, all of us together, that there is something that's bigger and more mysterious and beyond us, that isn't only the minutia of this of our day to day and our decision points, that where we only have a limited vantage point.
Oh my goodness. Again, it's an interesting edge, because I feel more like a pawn of the universe than I've ever felt. And I've felt like that quite a lot. But I'm also trying to step more into allowing myself to be a pawn of the universe, so that I can do her bidding in a way that I was brought here and meant to do it, right? And that's a really awkward place.
And it begs the question, what am I here to do and be and share an experience and right?
Yeah.
I find myself thinking occasionally, well, how we could, any of us die at any moment. How long do I think I'm around for? Because I'm aware that, just like some vacations are long vacations and some are short ones. Some lives are long ones and some are short ones. And I don't think it is, this is a very philosophical thing to say, but but I'm not sure that a life that lasts 40 years is a terrible catastrophe because it only lasted 40 years, and that a 90-year life is a good life because you lasted that long. Because I don't know that I see it that and I think this is true of a career too. Like, some of us are meant to have a big long career in one area and you know, get credits in all kinds of things that we've done and learned and accomplished, and others of us are moving from one to another, like bees that visit lots of different flowers. And so it really does beg the question, what do I think I'm doing here? Right? And how long do I think I have to do it? And if I think I have less time, does it make me operate differently? Do I value things differently? Do I value myself differently? Do I make different kinds of choices because I think I've got loads of time or very little? And I remember when I figured out that maybe we lived other lives, that to me, that was I heaved this massive sigh of relief, because it meant that I didn't have to do everything and be everything in this one lifetime, or I was going to miss it. So I haven't been running around trying to get a little of every different kind of experience because I might not be back again. It makes me make my choices differently. It's deep.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, for me, I've definitely put a lot of thought lately into what time I have and how I want to spend how I want to spend that.
However long it is.
However
Could be
long it
another
is.
30 years.
Yeah.
We don't know. Yeah.
The conversation that we had a week or two ago, though, really got me thinking a lot, because we were talking sort of about this idea of, what do you decide to do, or how do you do the thing that you're doing, and be on purpose or feel on purpose. And forever in my life, I've had this sort of quandary of, what should I do? What should I be doing? How should I be doing the thing that I don't feel like I know what I'm doing with myself about? And I remember sitting, in my 20s in the car with my dad outside the apartment where I lived in, and, having this existential crisis. And my dad looking very dadly at me and saying, "You would be a really good nurse and you'd be a really good teacher. Why don't you be one of those?" Right? And I was so angry with him. I was so angry with him because they seemed so mainstream, right? How dare my dad tell me that I should be a teacher or a nurse? And yet, the thing that I have spent my whole entire life doing and being is doulaing people, whether that's through the birth process as a birth doula, or through the death process with, some folks who have been close to me, and family members and friends, and through processes of just other transformational exercises of, starting here and ending up somewhere else, and mentoring people and holding people's hands and um,
And
coaching
birthing radio
and
shows.
all of the things, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and so it's I think it's twofold, right? It's like, yes, we make choices about the ways that we show up, but we also just show up in almost an unconscious sort of way, because that's what our soul is calling us to show up as and for, and the ways in which we're going to serve um, our communities are they're it's like they're inherent somehow, and
You
so
couldn't not do it.
I couldn't not do it. And one of the things that I that I guess I'm learning is that, if I had tried less hard to figure out what it is that I was trying to do, and just allowed myself to do the thing that I was already doing to the max all the time in all of these different ways, I might have been able to have a lot more sense of satisfaction about where I was in my life and what and how I was doing and how I was showing up for not only myself, but the others, the other people in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of those things where, I thought I knew that I knew it all back then, and turns out I knew squat.
And now you're in the liberating place of knowing that there's still a whole bunch more to learn. In fact, in a way, you're doulaing yourself right now.
Well, that does not escape me either.
Yeah.
I think we started the conversation a little bit talking about how, there's this line of how we know what we know in a book learning sort of way, but then there's praxis, right? Then there's the actual lived experience that bona fides the theory, and that yeah, absolutely, this is part of what I feel is my learning, is how to hold my own hand.
Yeah. And isn't that so selfful? I mean, rather than being selfish, that's very selfful to do that, to learn to do it, to try to practice that is so selfful.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to ourselves and our communities, is to be as selfful as we can possibly be. Because to me, one of the most important things in my life is the connections that I'm able to create and experience with other human beings on this planet. And I guess when I meet people like you, I always see what the learning edge is, because it's what fascinates me. It's how, not just what are we becoming, because I'm not sure how important that is, but how are we becoming? And how are we becoming the thing that, as you just said, that's inherent in us? It's the macrocosm in the microcosm. I remember reading a book many years ago called The Holographic Universe. And it's that all the parts are in the whole and the whole's in all the parts. And I suspect that the whole of me is in this part, but this part of me is also part of my whole. It's just one part. And I'm very aware that this conversation is only reflective of a part of who you are to date, and a part of who we are in how we know each other to date. And we're not done. And nor are any of you out there who are listening to us done. We're not done. We're all cooking. we're all in process. We're all becoming and evolving. And we can only know what we know up until now. And I'm very aware that above all of that, there's a greater knowing that I think we all have. It comes through in our dreams and all the amazing synchronicities in our lives. Because I still remember you walking into the studio just before we went live on air with our show. And I remember thinking, oh, this is an interesting person. And that was 7 odd years ago. Goes fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for joining us all who are going to listen to this. And being aware, of course, that this is a journey and that you are becoming, and I look forward to at some point maybe being able to have you come back again and say more about how the journey has continued and where you're ending up next on this amazing journey called life, because it ain't over.
And it is an amazing journey.
Yeah, always.
You know, always. Surprising, miraculous turns of everything.
Of all everything. Kinds. Right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. And thank God for the internet, because it means that we can have this conversation across a continent and an ocean, and make these connections and then share them across continents and oceans. When all of our listeners come and have a peek at not just your process, but our process together, I guess, and what is evolving, I think, for all of us, because we're all in transition in some way. Mm-hmm. I like what you said at the beginning, a woman in transition. I feel like a woman in transition too, for different reasons than you are, but maybe not completely. No. Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining me. Thank all of you for coming along and spending some time with us today, whatever day it is for you as you do this. And until next time, remember, you too can speak intuition.